turn on my slideshow. I'm going to try to multitask here and tell you guys about a conversation that was had last night at the Walla Walla Conservation or County Conservation District meeting. I'm an associate board member there, which basically means that I get to give my input, but I don't have a voting. I'm just a dude that likes to talk. Anyway, folks that do things like CRP or CREP, which is a conservation it's conservation rehabilitation or reserve and enhancement program, and generally and it's typically focused on areas that are farm ground that runs adjacent to waterways. You guys remember that big fire this past summer north of town? Burned up, great big fire, went a long ways, burned up a lot of acres. Within all those thousands of acres that were burned, some of those acres were established CREP, so an area that somebody had stopped farming. They had planted with some native grasses and conifer trees and placed probably a plastic mulch to prevent the growth of their non-desirable plants. It's kind of funny how they treat it. It's like this is a natural or a native restoration project, and things that aren't native we consider weeds, and so we have weed control methods there. It just seems a little kind of funny how we do that. But so the point is that there was a 55-acre parcel, and the whole thing had been burned down, and the funds had been given to this landowner to restore that project, to go back in there, cut down and remove a lot of the burnt trees. These burnt trees of consequence or significance is that these trees that burned and those stumps that remained, they became a host or suitable habitat for a boring beetle, one that wasn't there before the burn but had come in and sort of taken advantage of the tree's weakened defenses. So they bore into the tree, they set up kind of nests and reproduce, and then this boring beetle generally does, it's responsible for a lot of damage to some of the trees that we see up on the mountains. And so as we made our plan to go back in there and restore this project with these grasses and trees, the concern was if we plant young, vulnerable trees next in a population or in an area that has this beetle, a pest to it, they're probably going to destroy the tree. We'll never get that establishment there. So, I'm like, well, how should we grind up all those tree stumps? Well, yeah, in fact, they are going to do that. Is the beetle going to go away? Well, the beetle, they said, is willing to live in a tree that has if there's a piece that's about 18 inches long and only an inch wide, it's suitable habitat. So even grinding up a bunch of tree stumps and getting, there's probably still going to be some there. Okay. Well, do we use an insecticide and go in and kill the beetle? Well, this is a waterway. We are the conservation district. Maybe we should, make that a plan B, plan C. Okay. So what in the hell are we going to do? Are there any ideas that come to mind at this point? So they want to plant grasses and trees, and these trees would be a suitable host for this pest that we know is there. So the grasses are not a suitable host. In other words, they wouldn't be affected by this beetle. So me being a non-voting, talking-only member, it's like, well, what if we go in and we just plant our grasses? Just no. And we take care of those trees and the stumps and all that, stuff, and knowing that there's going to be some beetles there. How about we establish this grass stand now, and in a couple of years, we go in and we plant our trees. With the idea that those beetles will, if they're there like any other pest, they have a reason to be there. A suitable environment, a host, or they're getting water, or they're getting fertilizer. They're there for a reason. And so if they deplete their reason for being there, or that goes away, then we just wait for that point. We know that they're not there anymore, like any of us. Resources are gone, we move on. So, problem with that is not, and that it's not sound. The problem with that ends up being a sort of a red tape, bureaucratic, funds available at this time, not this time. We got to get this project done by June. So I mean, I do have a real fear that potentially trees could be planted, and that all that those resources would, trees and money and time and all that stuff would be for naught. So what the board is going to, I don't know what decision exactly will be made, but my plan, our plan, I mean, in looking at the bigger picture, kind of letting go of this, when funding is available and whatnot. I mean, that is, not planting a crop because a known pest is there is absolutely a part of an integrated pest management program. Considering what crop we might plant behind another, say the year to follow, and whether or not it's a suitable host for an existing pest. We're going to have pests. They're going to be there. We try to manage them and look at those economics of treatment and damage and costs. But we can kind of leverage some methods to make that a minimal impact. Okay, so where I have let's say a high incidence of rust, well, I can make the assumption that I will probably have that the year to follow because it's there. It's in the soil, it's in the dead, on the dead plant matter that's on the ground, but it's there. So if that ground needs to go into rust again, into wheat the next year, I should probably plan on managing rust. If I think I'm going to rotate my crops, the idea that maybe I'm going to rotate into rye or barley or oats or something along those lines, are those susceptible to rust as well? In fact, they are. So that might not be a good way if rust is my problem, or any particular pest. Break it up. Break that disease cycle or that chain of events, okay? All right. I had to talk about integrated pest management a little bit because we're still talking about safety. Okay. Going back to safety culture things, I think we're talking about who is, you guys still can't see anything, of course. Let me make sure I'm still getting audio here. Real quick, if I can. That's interesting. I don't know how to get rid of that. Never done that before. Hold on. Okay, I'm just going to trust that I still have audio. I get nervous. I'm going to jack something up. Okay, so I think we had been there. So pretty much when we can say that, I just had that because by the time I was done writing all that stuff down, that's what I felt like. Okay, pretty much we can say that the Washington Administrative Code does 296 through 3-307, where you guys were referencing for the homework assignment, does apply to everybody. All right. So they go on further to define what an agriculture operation is. In other words, totally cover their bases and define about anything having to do with crop or animal production, and they even say horticultural production, things like ornamentals perhaps. I think we all know that those are ag related activities, all right? So let's see here. All right. So within that, the field operations and general requirements, and that was the section you guys were looking at, we've got all these different sections, specific and more really, but prevention for, accident prevention, first aid, safe place, what hand tools are legal, ladders, PPE, field sanitation, overhead lines, lots of sections there. You probably saw these words just as a reminder that must or shall, proper English applies, and that is a mandatory statement. Should or may, those are in fact optional statements or recommendations that are given as far as the legalities are concerned. All right, the employer has a lot of responsibilities, and this is for you guys to keep in mind as employers as well as employees. And as I've alluded to before, this has been informational for me. Now, granted, I don't run an operation in Washington, but in Oregon, and this has been sort of enlightening as far as, like, wow, I'm actually not quite doing that. Generally speaking, that's certainly a general comment, providing a safe and healthy working environment. That's debatable, what's safe and what's healthy, right? So don't worry, I mean, it's all defined. The employer has to ensure that employees aren't using defective or unsafe tools and equipment, certainly including those that are furnished by the employee. A lot of employers, especially bigger ones, it seems, I mean, a lot of capital, they will supply that new employee with, well, for example, a buddy of mine just went to work for this water damage restoration company. I think they're called, like, I can't remember. They're right across the street from the Maple counter. And this guy's always been a handyman. And they were like, all right, man, here's a list of tools that you're going to need. We're going to get them for you. And he's like, oh, don't worry, bro. I've got like 75% of those. I'm like, I've already got them. And they're like, well, we're going to supply them. And anyway, so make sure that they're all in good working order. And he has to pay for them. It's like, we'll just slowly take it out of your paycheck and tell you just what you got to do. So, I mean, that's one way. I'd never heard of it being at that level. But it's just making sure that they can ensure that they don't have defective equipment. It's sort of a liability for both sides. So, also employees have to implement a written accident prevention program. Okay, so not only are they required to train, but they also have that available for reference and posted, like available to the employee. I cannot say that I personally had an accident prevention program available for my employees to reference. A lot of our training was on the job training. A lot of our safety discussions were as needed. The state says that we have to do a toolbox talk at least once a month or every time a job changes. So as we roll in or I guess as we're rolling into harvest, we've got to be having a toolbox talk or a safety get together about some of the safety things that we need to be aware of. Normally that's like a kegger in a rally like this is getting ready to go. We're harvest time, and then we show up day one after a kickoff party. So adjust that a little bit if that's the case. Hazard communication programs, an established system for recording and reporting accidents that happen. I'll tell you what, if you can get this list of what you need to do to be within compliance as an employer in Washington, the nice thing is that now you could Google WISHA reporting and recording documents and have that documentation there and ready to be filled out. Okay, and there's an amount of time. Did anybody catch that in reading on how quickly accidents have to be reported? Legally within 24 hours. And the only exception to that would be if you were totally unaware. And in a lot of cases, that's kind of difficult. Okay. A lot of this is just sort of for awareness. Like there's a lot. Okay. Confined spaces. Anybody ever worked for an employer that had them in confined spaces? You did. Yeah, you did. Well, I mean you went through that training. Like it was probably a good day at least of training, right? Do you remember like sort of what the focus of that training was? I used to always think it was just for folks that were somewhat claustrophobic, but there's a bit more to it than that, I think. Why did you feel like they were teaching you how to work in a confined space or that it required additional training? Like what was the focus there? Okay. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, carbon dioxide. And you get into a confined space, like that person that forgets to shut off their car in the garage, kind of a deal. Carbon dioxide exposure. Something I think I was curious about the other day was like, why is it that dust needed to be collected or exhausted from a building. And I was like, yeah, let me kind of look into that. The whole idea there was that a flammable material like a dust or vapors, particular vapors, when they condense, they are to be exposed to oxygen, which certainly there's there. It just takes, like, we've got two of the three parts of the fire triangle. We've got something that burns, we've got an igniter, fuel, the oxygen, just takes a spark. Okay, and that is how a lot of production plants have gone up in flames. It's just a chain reaction of a whole bunch of dust just igniting at once, basically. And the reason I just thought of that is because I was reading something about confined spaces and dust separation and whatnot. So anyway, that was I guess enough discussion about confined spaces. Protection from biological agents. Where around here would somebody expect to be exposed to some biological agents as part of their job? Waste and treatment plant. Major employer as well, and historically has been the nuclear waste disposal, Hanford, right? Yeah. I mean, every time my grandmother-in-law talks about Hanford, she cries because the husband that was an electrician up there that died in the early 90s. And it was like direct correlation, like, yep, those carcinogens that were collected out there. At that time, folks, or at a time, folks were somewhat unaware of the exposures, once again. Whether that was intentionally unaware or just we didn't have the knowledge. And I like to think that that is generally the case. We don't have the knowledge. There's greed every once in a while too, but things to be aware of, okay? All right, so if a serious injury occurs, the employer needs to, for you, if you're that person that was injured, report to Labor and Industry within 8 hours. So they only give that 24-hour exception, or I guess if, I think it says, the exception, okay? If you don't learn of the incident, you have to report within 8 hours. I don't know where 24 hours came from. I know I read that, but let's see. I don't know if it mentions it in here. It's also important that the scene be kind of left in place for maybe the insurance investigator, or unless it's like an unsafe, like this equipment needs to be moved out of here. We had a tractor tip over into a ditch going down the road pulling a planter one time, and I think the guy was, so he's going down the road, he's pulling a planter behind his tractor that's about the width of the road, right? So that dude just cruising, and he was trying to avoid mailboxes. So he's kind of like doing one of these numbers, and I don't know. He said he was looking over his shoulder on the side of the mailbox he was trying to avoid, and he went over into the ditch on the other side. Anyway, he balled up the tractor and the planter and stuff. It wasn't too bad, but our safety guy at Pioneer made, like, we couldn't. He was like, no, you got to leave it there, man. You got to leave it. And he was in Hermiston. This happened in Walla Walla. He wanted us to wait so he could get pictures. And we were blocking a road as it was. And so we had time, and I was sitting there, and I was like, this, I'm just going to do it. We're just going to pull it off the road. Like, we can't leave it right here. While I was doing that, somebody else was on their phone, just kind of covering my back, and they're the ones who are like, hey, when Richard gets here, maybe it was just coincidence that this guy actually went by Dick and he was our safety officer. So when Richard gets here and he's all upset about this, right here, man, like this was an unsafe thing, it being on the road, and so don't worry, bro, you're covered. It's just one of those things, But in fact, I mean, that is really important to a lot of people, that it's not messed with, or the scene, I guess, okay? All right. Those reports have a lot of information that needs to be recorded, okay? That description of the incident, all this stuff. Those big injury stuff was filled out, and it's just, it's a lengthy process. But coming from where we were talking about, being here just a generation or two ago, if this stuff isn't on record, it didn't happen. And if it didn't happen, or there's not record of it and it's all talk, it's kind of hard to put some sort of procedure in place to keep people from being taken advantage of. And that's really what this whole thing comes down to, is keeping people safe, aware, and less able to be just taken advantage of. Wonder what was going on with this picture here. Following too close? Maybe. Okay, I wonder what kind of hay that is. Yeah, oh shit, yeah, that's what it is. I don't know. All right. Employers have to cooperate with you and other employees, that is, to eliminate accidents. In other words, when the employee says, hey boss, I think we might want to adjust the way we're doing this because I'm seeing a close call every time we do it. For him to wave you off is not legal, and it's not wise or really good leadership anyway. The employees must be informed of and observe all safe practices. In other words, what we call best practices, or the way that we do things. You need to be informed of that, and you need to be shown that, and with the expectancy that they can do that when you leave, and you're not setting them up for failure. Okay, and in that training, that exposure has to document it too. Cover yourself as the employer. Document that training occurred. Labor and Industries is always happy to talk to the person that injured themselves on the job. If you want to kind of take that perspective for a second. If you can document that they've been shown the safe way to do things, and that injury that they incurred should not have happened if they were reasonably doing it as a way. Cover yourself with that documentation, okay? If your employee notices an unsafe condition of equipment or the workplace, it's their responsibility to tell you. This isn't a should or a may, this is a must, okay? And must use all required safety devices and protective equipment. So when I was getting chewed on for walking out of a field and not using that stuff, in fact, I was kind of hanging my employer out there. All right. A whole lot of stuff. I used to deal with number 5 quite a bit. I used to be the guy that actually, on occasion, couldn't use my hard hat because it was cracked or whatever. Sorry boss, couldn't use it. The strap on the back of it's broken. See, it just doesn't work. Or it's super hot outside. We're detasseling. We're all required to wear hats, glasses, face shields, sleeves, gloves, you name it. Sometimes it was much more comfortable to forget or lose or break some PPE. So I had glasses and gloves available for everybody if they showed up without them that day. Anyway, I'll also tell you that I was really good about being busy during scheduled required training events. Sorry man, I'm contracting with a grower today. It's a contract, I gotta be there. I'll catch up later. There's going to come a point where that audit happens. And it's all right, what do you guys do? Let me see the safety training, or let me see the best practices of that. Let me see the safety breakdown of that. And most importantly, or as importantly, let me see that your current employees have attended that training, and let's see the documentation. That is standard protocol right there. Again, maybe it's beneficial to ask for an inspection from the state. Call O&I up or Labor and Industries up. Let them know, hey, I would really like to get an inspection on my farm to make sure I'm in compliance. And they'll probably leave you with quite a few things to do, but better than getting a fine for all those things left undone or that hadn't been done. All right, in the past, we're not going to do that this quarter, but I had students just, it's kind of in that last question, hey, what's your culture? Did you grow up with a dad that was pulling you in, from falling out of a pickup? Did you, do you have that mentality? But why is it that you have that culture? I'd say, folks that are maybe more have worked for themselves or their family, have probably had a lot less exposure to the safety culture that the law requires than folks that have gone to work for another or larger employment outfit. But and all those things, it's like a job safety analysis is looking at what you're doing, what the job is, but really busting it out into those steps, and then looking at those individual parts of the step, or of the process anyway, and implementing some safety and best practices to that. So how it can be done differently. Every single one of our standing or standard operating procedures, SOPs, were revised annually. Just kind of speaking to that industry, you can get a lot of exposure going to work for a big company like Wilbur McGregor, Pioneer, Monsanto, whatever. And you will learn how to be in compliance because those companies know that everybody's watching all the time. And so every winter, we were not field men, of course, and it was wintertime, but all of us got really good with Excel and revising standing operating procedures and writing them and certifying them for the next year. So every operating procedure was looked at, and every one of those events were trained on it before we went into the growing season. And if you have a significant number of employees, I mean, shoot, if it was me, more than one, I don't want to have this conversation multiple times, I would really encourage you to figure out a time of the year that you can knock out some of the safety training so that it's not hovering over you as you go into that op tempo, that high op tempo part of the season. Okay. I think these might. All right, I'm going to just check this video, see if it's any good. It might tell me what the other ones are. If not, maybe just moving on. If you're listening at home, you might want to just follow or pause and follow the link. But oh, this is ladder fails. It's pretty good. It's a fails video. I mean, somewhat entertaining. It's kind of weird too, but I think I told you guys one day that that the number one reason, or that folks hurt themselves at home doing maintenance is ladder related stuff. I can't remember, but if they don't throw Clark Griswold in on this whole thing, it's not totally worthwhile.
Today's worst person in the sports world. These mortar ladders to cut down the dust before. There's so much room up here. I feel like dancing.
Anytime you're tempted to use a ladder, just think could I use scaffolding here? Using a ladder when you're limbing a tree. I mean, I know it's not easy to get spikes and a harness and all that stuff, but being up in a tree that you're cutting branches off of with a ladder is that is sketchy. Ooh. They should have just made this the only part of the video, because this they'll come back to him. But enough said. Ooh. There we go. Oh, I thought that. All right. Well, this is a good message.
Please subscribe and join with us in bringing that number down to zero.
This house out in Tushy has vaulted ceilings, and it's a rental right now. And I was between renters and out there over Christmas break, just painting my ass off. And anyway, I did that one night. Had 2 seriously close calls. It was just like, right, I'm done with the ladder. I'm done using the ladder to paint this house. And I went and got a plywood for a base and scaffolding, which sucks kind of to set up. Scaffolding is heavy and cumbersome and whatnot, but it's basically you've just created a ground, surface for it. You can put your stuff there, like I'm one of those guys that gets to the top of the ladder and realizes I forgot something at the bottom of the ladder. Get rid of all that stuff by using scaffolding and not worry about working late at night and busting your butt and nobody knowing you hurt yourself. I was putting too much pressure on myself, I don't know. Okay. So, like we talked about, this is kind of what we do when we just kind of do that natural risk assessment anyways. You guys don't need to do this as an assignment, but when you've isolated, kind of pointed out that thing that you want to maybe break down into a safer operation. So you've selected the job, you break it down into the basic steps, look at those potential hazards, and then come up with your preventative methods. Sounds pretty natural, right? That's what you do. It can be somewhat enlightening to put that on paper sometimes, and to watch somebody else kind of go through the process versus and do it yourself, But yeah, I know that there have been several times that I've been reluctant to do these JSAs, but in watching somebody else do it, it's like, that is a way better way of doing it than the way I was doing it. Like maybe that should be the way to train to do it, or vice versa. So it's, it can be pretty enlightening, I think. Okay, so let's take a look at this job. Like maybe with the resources this guy has available, that is his best method. I don't know. All right, to do this, I guess, across the board for all of your operating procedures, set priorities, I guess, is what this is saying. Like, let's look at those most dangerous ones first. All right. Watch somebody do it. Don't get overly detailed, and it's like you can be a cook in reading directions, or what do they call a recipe, I guess they call it. And for that second, you're just like, okay, wait, how much? It's just like, wait a minute, I'm a freaking cook here. Like, I kind of know how this needs to go together, but I'm so caught up in following this recipe details. So don't overdo that, with the expectancy that your employee is going to, like, look at it and, it's like, really try to find a happy middle, And it's like when you've done something a million times, somebody's like, no, you gotta do it like this, you gotta do it like this. And there's that annoying dude, it's like, no, put your right hand here, and you're like, what? Stuff like that. It's like, you're making me lose sight of what it is I'm trying to accomplish here. Don't get too detail oriented. Okay. That's, yeah. What could go wrong? How likely is it? So this is non-OSHA on the left, OSHA on the right. Well, I don't think, in some cases actually, a welder really does need to kind of get down in it. What I'm saying? So, I don't know, but I sure as hell would not want to be doing that weld with that PPE on. No way. Okay. Any welders in here? Sweet. All right. This is like, I just like watching getting a little entertainment here. All right, identify potential unsafe practices here. No spotter. Shit. Oh, shit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice lift, bro. Yeah, well, at least he was filming it. Yeah. So, those are, some standout things. So I worked with this guy. This is on a deployment. We're working like 6 days a week, We didn't really have anything else to do except for like work. They had a gym for us, and he always showed up early at the gym. And when I got there, he didn't matter if we were doing like even pull-ups that day or legs or whatever. He was on the flat bench just repping as fast and hard as he could, and just ga, 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 ga. And he was a big guy, and he had like, he didn't have a whole lot of weight, but he would go up so fast. It was like he was throwing the weight up, and it would almost come off of his hands. And so like if you're spotting him, I was like, dude, quit throwing it, man. And anyway, I wasn't there one day, and I went to catch up with him later that night, and he was laying in bed all balled up and whimpering and stuff, and he had just done that whole thing and kind of slipped off his hands, and I think he had like 225 on there, and it just didn't matter how big he was. He had 225 pounds go up, it slipped, and it fell, the length of his arms, probably a good 3 feet, just hit him on the chest. It kind of like bounced it a little bit, and that guy spent like the next month just laying in bed and not being able to do his job, and I had to work with somebody new every day, and it sucked until he got back. But anyway, let's call it there for today, and we should, I think, be finishing up the safety stuff, going into integrated pest management, more about what it is and how to do it before the week's over. Do your assignments, no late work.